Guten Abend, Year 11. Well done for tuning in to your night before video for German reading and listening. With speaking out of the way, you now have 25% of your German grade already saved. As you can see, the listening and reading exam tomorrow are really important because they contribute 50% to your total grade. This video contains top tips for the listening and reading exams. There are also some examples of question types. The contents in order are the tips for both exams, the listening exam tips, followed by the reading exam tips. Remember, this is going to be quite fast. You can always pause and make notes, or you can pause and have a go at the questions before I give you some answers. Let's have a look at some grade boundaries. Here are the 2019 boundaries. These ones are a little bit harsher than other years. If you look at these boundaries, you can work out that on a foundation paper, you want to get 31 marks at least out of 50 for a grade 5. And on a higher paper, you want to get at least 27 marks out of 50 for a grade 7. So all of the marks really count. And we need to be aware of this when we're going through both of these papers. Of course, you need a lot of knowledge of German vocabulary to be successful in these exams. However, you can also cleverly use strategy to work out what some of the answers might be and give yourself a better chance of getting those marks. My first top tip is to make sure that you do not leave any multiple choice questions blank. Especially if you're doing the foundation paper, a lot of the reading and listening questions are multiple choice. So you know that the answer is there. You just need to pick the right one. If you complete the more challenging questions first, you have more of a chance of getting to the right answer because you will be a little bit fresher. Remember, the reading exam is straight after the listening, so you already will be a little bit tired. Why not complete section B of the reading first? That's a section that's all in German. That way you can give this your best go and then go back to section A and then complete the translation. If you have a look at how many marks a question is worth, that's how many answers you need to give. It sounds obvious, but a lot of time when we're marking these tests, we see that pupils have misread the question and given 6 answers where the examiner only wants 3. If the examiner is looking for 3 marks, they are needing you to put 3 crosses in the boxes. What I like to do is if I have a question where I'm really not sure about it, I do it to the best of my ability and then I fold the corner of that page. That way, when I finish the exam and I've left time to check, I go quickly to the folded corners and I check those questions first because they were the ones that I had the least confidence about. Let's have a look at the listening exam. That's the first one that you will do. Bear in mind, you will not be the only person thinking, I don't understand this. That's a perfectly natural reaction. For the listening exam, you don't need to understand every single word. The exam is testing whether you can pick out the key words and answer a question based on what you've heard. The overall strategy is therefore to listen for the keywords and make educated guesses. Do not leave any questions blank. These questions are mainly multiple choice. At the start of the exam, you will be given 5 minutes reading time. This time is crucial. Do not waste it by looking around the exam room with your exam paper closed. As soon as the reading time starts, you should open up your paper and on the next few slides I will explain what to use the reading time for. Remember, if we look at the harshest grade boundaries, you need to get 31 marks out of 50 for a grade 5 or 27 marks out of 50 for a grade 7 on the higher. Make sure that you are not leaving anything blank because every question is worth it to try to get to those marks. During the 5 minutes reading time, you should look at the title of each extract. The title will tell you what you're about to hear. For example, in this one, Going to the Cinema, you can already start to predict the kind of German words that you're about to hear in the question. For this one, problems in my town, what do you think you might hear? Pause the recording and note down your answers. I've written de moule, de Verkehr, so litter, traffic, die Obdachlosen. Okay, so I've given some suggestions of problems that I think might come up, the common ones, the typical ones that we've done in class. How about this one? A music event in Lorient. What could that be? We might not have heard the word Lorient before, but it's got a capital letter, so we're assuming it's going to be a place. Pause now and write down what you think you would hear in German if you had this question. I've written these answers. How about for this one? School subjects. That's a very common topic to come up in both of these exams. What could you hear? My answers? I've tended to go for the more unusual school subjects because I think something like English or math, all of us are going to know that. So I've gone for the ones like art and geography and history. A lot of people get mixed up between geography and history, but remember, Geschichte is also the word for a story. How about this final one? This one's a little bit more obscure. It's in the topic of jobs and future plans. It's my job in a zoo. What words would you expect to hear in that recording? So again, I've kept it generic with things like arbeiten, die Tiere, animals, and schwierig, difficult. You can also read through the question itself. So instead of just reading the title, have a look at what questions you're going to have to answer. You can also start to predict the most difficult words next to these questions. For the non-multiple choice questions, you can start to predict what you might hear. For example, in this question on working in a zoo, you get asked one task that a zookeeper has to do. Now, surely it's going to be something that you could easily predict, such as clean the animals, feed the animals, or buy new animals. What do you think B might be? How do we know he cares for the animals he works with? Give 2 details. Without even hearing the recording, what could be a sensible answer? Pause here and have a think. So I've put that maybe he works extra hours for the animals, maybe he cleans them, feeds them, maybe he knows them all by name. What do you think is one disadvantage of being a zookeeper? I've gone for maybe the smell, maybe it's really tiring, maybe the salary's not very good. So even though this question seems quite specific, you can still think of general answers that you might want to put if a question on jobs came up. It's definitely not worth leaving these questions blank, even if you really don't hear the answer on the tape. Just put something logical. During the 5 minutes reading time, many pupils go straight to question 13 if you're doing foundation, or question 1 if you're doing higher. This is the question that features the box, which has all of the answers in. You have to figure out which answer belongs in which sentence. However, only 2 or 3 words will actually be able to go in that sentence, so you can start to figure out the potential answers. I strongly recommend that you use the 5 minutes reading time to categorize the words in the box. For example, 89 and 98, they could be one of the right answers. Probably both of them won't get used. We've also got some times, 7:30 and 8:30. So again, one of these questions is going to be about a time, but only one of the answers will get used. In German, it's very easy to notice the nouns because they start with capital letters. So these 2 things here, they might be people, places, or things, so that makes it easier to put into the gaps. We also have here, we can notice that we've got erst, as in first and zwei as in second. So again, those ones would belong together. If you start to put the words into categories, you can then start to translate the sentences. For example, this one, the room costs, and then we've got a certain amount of euros. Now you know that the answer has to be 89 or 98. So it makes your life a lot easier when the recording actually starts. For this one, you have breakfast begins at, so you know that it's going to be one of the time phrases. I strongly recommend you take a highlighter into the exam and you start by looking at this question first during the 5 minutes reading time and working out the potential answers for each sentence. This will make this question easier to tackle when you actually hear the recording. This one might seem obvious, but don't forget to check how many answers you actually need to give. There have been lots of times when pupils have seen a question like this, where you clearly need to give 3 correct answers and there's 3 available marks. And we have seen pupils put 9 different crosses all over the page. We have seen 3 per person. We have seen just random boxes ticked. We have seen some pupils who think that the example is one of the answers. So please remember, there are 3 different people. Each person will have 1 answer. So for example, it might look like this. If in doubt, just have a look at the mark scheme. How many marks does the examiner want you to give? This one is 3 marks, and then you should be able to get the right answer. Now let's look at the reading exam. The reading exam will be straight after the listening. So whatever happens in the listening exam, however much you feel that you might have messed some things up, you need to put that to the back of your mind and you need to reset. The reading exam is a great opportunity for you to score marks because all of the answers are there on the paper in front of you and they're not going to disappear after 2 readings like in the listening. So you need to take every opportunity to get the marks in this part of the exam. The overall strategy is to read each question carefully and scan the text for the keywords. So find out what the examiner needs you to find and retrieve that information for them. Be careful for common tricks. In German, the examiners like to use words such as meistens, mostly. I mostly spend the weekend with my friends. Nie, never. That's a really small word, so you might miss it. And nur, meaning only. So for example, they might say, the only sport I like is football. And you might get it mixed up with nie and think that it means that they don't like football. So look out for words like that. As I said before, you cannot leave any questions blank. You need all the marks you can get. They are mainly multiple choice. On the higher paper, you've got more open-ended questions. But again, if you answer precisely and you look for the key information that the examiner needs, you shouldn't have to leave anything blank. Everyone can give a sensible answer to these questions. So for the reading exam, you've got 3 sections. You've got section A, which is worth the most amount of marks, 28 marks out of 50, and that's questions in English. You've got section B, questions in German, that's worth 15 marks. And you've got section C, which is a translation into English, that's 7 marks. I recommend that you complete the exam in the following order, just because you want to make sure that your brain is really fresh when you're looking at the most difficult questions. And you also want to give yourself time to process the translation and do a better version of it before you finish the exam. Therefore, my suggestion is start with an easy question to warm up from section A. For example, question 1 is normally very easy. If you then turn to the translation at the back, you can do a rough draft. So you can make sure that you've written all of the bits that you know, and then you can leave it for a while to come back to it with fresh eyes at the end. Next, I would complete section B because these questions are in German, so you really need to focus on them a lot more than section A. Then I would go back and complete any of the questions from section A that I haven't finished yet, before returning to the translation and rewriting it with fresh eyes. Because sometimes when we're translating, we do it in a very direct way, and we know that German word order is very different to English word order. So if you have a look at it afresh, you might suddenly realize, that's what they're trying to say, and be able to put it into better English. At the end, you always need to check that you've answered everything. You should not be sat around in any of your exams with free time. If you're sat with free time, there's probably an issue. Normally it means that you've missed some of the mistakes, you've missed some of the tricks. So if you do think you've finished, go back, read the translation again, read section B again, make sure you haven't fallen for any tricks, and have a look at any questions from section A that you found a little bit suspiciously easy. Because again, maybe the examiner asked you to find your sister's favourite food, but you've accidentally written the brother's. So double check all of that. Section B looks like the most difficult one, but you've got to try to treat these questions as match-up questions. So what I mean by that is, if you start by reading the question first, so Silke muss blank aufstehen, and we've got a series of numbers. If you start by reading that first, you can then scan the text and see where the answer actually is. So we can see here, ich muss leider, I must unfortunately, so it must be something, not very positive, halb sechs aufstehen, Now we know in German a very common trick is to mention times, because when Germans say 6:30, what we would say is 5:30. So we would actually say the hour before. So that's one of the common tricks, and you can see that they've put 6:30 to try to throw some of you off. But because you've all listened to this, because you've listened well in class, you wouldn't get caught out by that. So let's have a look at the second one. We've got that word meisten that we mentioned earlier. So most of the colleagues are, so we've got nett, lustig, launisch, unfreundlich. What are most of the colleagues like? So let's scan through. So we've got meine Kollegen sind freundlich. Okay, so it seems as though the answer is going to be nice because they're very friendly. Then we've got that little word nur that we said we need to look out for. Only a young receptionist is always moody. So we're not looking for launisch, because if I just matched up, it says launisch there and launisch there, actually I would get that wrong because it says that the receptionist is launisch, but the colleagues in general, most of the colleagues are actually freundlich, so they are very nice. You need to also look out for tenses. So for example, as we've mentioned a lot in class, if you see TE at the end of the word, that's like seeing ED in English. So I walked, I visited, that's past tense. So look out for things like that. You will know from class that if you see words that start with G, so gemacht, gespielt, gegessen, then you know that that will also be past tense. For future tense, it's going to be things such as ich würde, ich möchte. So just think about what we do in class for the starter and you should be absolutely fine. But don't forget about tenses when we're doing the reading exam, because sometimes a question will say, what did she used to do? And you'll have to look for where it's written in the past tense. The first question on reading section B, the German section, is the same technique as listening question 13, the one that we practiced earlier. So remember, this is the question where all of the answers are in the box, but only 2 or 3 will actually fit each sentence. So it's quite easy to work out where the answer might be just by categorizing the words. For example, you might notice that there are a certain amount of time phrases. So you would group those time phrases together, and that could actually help you to figure out the answer. You might also have a look then at the questions themselves. So for example, for A, we have the volunteers live in a, so it needs to be a place where they can live. Now again, look, if I've put this into categories, I might put hotel into a category and Zelt, a tent. Okay, so hotel and Zelt. If I then look back at the actual text and I scan through this, I can see the word to live, sie wohnen. I know if I look earlier that it's talking about the volunteers, and here we have Campingplatz. So if they're living in a Campingplatz, they're not going to be living in a hotel. So that wipes out that word and tells us that the answer must be out. So a lot of these questions, it just comes down to process of elimination, clever thinking, looking at categories, looking at things that could fit, and not panicking. It's very easy for pupils to just panic when they look at section B and think, I haven't got a chance, it's all in German. But if you break it down logically and you follow the techniques that I've been showing you in this video, you actually see that it's not as challenging as you think. A lot of it is like a puzzle, like a logic puzzle. So the final question of the reading exam is a translation into English, and it's worth 7 marks. And there's 7 fairly easy to get marks, so you should not neglect this section of your paper. The most important tip I can give to you is please do not try to translate it word by word. As you know from class, German word order is very different to word order. If we translate it step by step like this, we end up with a really bizarre sentence. It won't make any sense. It's actually much better to look at the chunks section by section. So for example, with this one, if you're looking at who is doing the action, you've got ich. If you're looking at other information in a sentence, we've got Berlin. So you know it's something to do with going to Berlin. And then when we notice it's a gut word, we know that it's past tense. I went to Berlin. If you translate it step by step, you might get confused that it says, I am going to Berlin. Just look at it as a whole chunk. It's easier to actually break up the paragraph into sections using the commas and full stops. I like to break it up into around 7 sections because it's worth 7 marks. So for example, in this one, my first section would be there. You can pause and break this up for yourself, or you can continue watching. It's up to you. I'm going to go through how I would break up this paragraph. For me personally, I would put the different sections like this. So I'm looking overall for around about 7 sections. Then when I've got the chunk, instead of translating it word by word, I have a look for clues. So for example, in this one, I know that I am doing the action. I know that it's with my family, and I know that it's Hamburg. So I've got I, my family, Hamburg. Now I try and make it into a logical sentence. I am with my family in Hamburg. You know, I go to Hamburg with my family. Something along these lines that's logical, that contains that information, but is not a direct translation word for word from that German sentence, because that will not make sense. Sometimes when you're translating, so for example, if you look at this first translation I did, I am with my family in Hamburg. Sometimes you can make it sound a little bit better and more natural for an English speaker. That's why I suggested that you do this early on, then you complete the rest of the paper, and then you read it again at the end. Because then you can decide, oh, actually it might sound more natural if I said I'm in Hamburg with my family. And you might want to change it around a bit based on your reading at the end of the exam. Section A, it's worth the most marks, and it's actually the easiest section. It's standard what we call Where's Wally technique. Now I know that I've taught you this before in lessons, other teachers have taught you this too. So we call it the Where's Wally technique because when you're looking at a book, a Where's Wally book, you're not just scanning for a random person. You know what Wally looks like, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking for someone wearing that classic outfit with the glasses and the hat. In German, if you read the question first, then you know what you're scanning the text for. For example, in this one, when we read this question, the story is about Christmas, a birthday, Easter, a holiday. Now I know what I'm scanning the text for. I know what my answer is going to look like. It's going to be to do with a holiday, a festival. So now we can scan the text and we can see if we can actually find which one they're referring to. However, don't just go straight in and put the first word that you find. Make sure you're checking for tricks. For example, it might say something along the lines of, last year for Christmas, we went on holiday. However, let me tell you about this year when it was my birthday. Something really interesting happened. And then you would have to decide what the right answer is because the text actually mentions both of them. So don't just scan it and match it. Make sure you read around the word. But usually the best way to tackle these questions is by doing that, by looking at the question first and then scanning for the correct answer. As I've said before, take a highlighter in, because then when you scan the text and you notice things such as negatives, you can highlight them straight away to remind yourself to look out for them just in case they're going to trip you up later on. Here's an example of one of the open-ended questions. Remember, do not leave anything blank. Even with the questions like this, we can make a sensible guess as to what the answer might be. So for example, what did Madeline's father think about living on a farm as a child? We haven't even seen the text, but we can all guess something along the lines, perhaps he thought it was boring, perhaps he thought it was amazing, but we can all make a sensible guess. Give one reason why Madeline would like to live in the mountains. Maybe it's because they're really beautiful. Maybe it's because she likes walking. However, we're giving one reason. If the worst comes to the worst and we cannot find an answer in the text, we put something logical and safe because maybe we accidentally get the question right. The most important thing is do not leave anything blank. Questions that pupils tend to find more challenging on section A are the literature questions. So these are taken from German novels, but they're heavily adapted to make them suitable for GCSE. Some pupils find these more daunting, however they're just the same as other reading questions, even though the style of writing might be slightly different. Always read the information that you're given at the top, because that will give you some context as to what you're reading about. For example, in this one, the extract is from the point of view of a character called Erica, and the bit that we're reading takes place in Erica's bedroom. As I said before, we need to start by looking at the question so we know what type of answer we're trying to find. So for this first question we have, the story is about Christmas, a birthday, Easter, a holiday. If I scan through the text, I see straight away Geburtstag. So I just need to double check around it that there's nothing else that kind of says it wasn't my birthday or it was my brother's birthday or something a little bit different. So I just check, in der Nacht vor meinem Geburtstag kann ich nicht richtig schlafen. Okay, so it's talking about the night before the birthday. So yeah, we can safely say that this story is about a birthday. So even though it was a literature question, I just did the same technique. I'm just cross-referencing, I'm matching. A lot of this paper is about matching, and you must remember that the answers are there. They're not going away. It's up to you to find them. So let's have a look at question 2. At 7 o'clock, Erica, so we're looking for a time phrase, so I carry on scanning through. Remember, they're normally in order. So after the Geburtstag, here I've got 7 o'clock. Mache ich langsam, so slowly, doing something slowly, die Augen auf, something about the eyes. So we can have a look at the questions. We've got falls asleep, gets out of bed, opens her eyes, calls her parents. So we can see that she slowly opens her eyes, so she's quite tired. Okay, but that's fairly easy to match up. The main words I need are Geburtstag and Augen, but I just do a little check around the words just in case there's any tricks, because I'm not going to get caught out. I'm going to do really, really well on this paper and get as many marks as I can. Well done for using this video to complete your night before revision for the reading and listening exams. Remember, these are the grade boundaries that we're looking at. These are the harshest ones. Hopefully yours in summer will be nicer than this. But if we go by these boundaries, then for a foundation paper, we need at least 31 marks out of 50. And for a higher, we want at least 27 marks out of 50 to get our grade 7. If you stay calm in these exams, if you follow my advice, if you have taken in highlighters and you're highlighting negatives, if you're looking at the question first and then scanning for the answer and making sure you don't make any mistakes, if you're making sure that you don't leave any gaps, then you are putting yourself in the best possible place to do well at these exams. When you finish these exams, you know that 50% of the GCSE is out of the way. Remember, all of it adds together. We need as many marks as we get so that we can make sure that we reach these grade boundaries at the end of the day. If you have any more questions, please email me. If you're looking for some revision, if you still have some time and you want to know what to revise, I suggest that you look on Arbor at the small but deadly words list, or you can get your mind maps. You can complete your mind maps and put keywords for every topic, the ones that we started for the last exams. Or you can do practice papers, past papers. They're a really good way of seeing the kind of words and the kind of techniques that the examiners are going to use in the real thing. Remember your highlighters tomorrow. Remember to answer everything. Remember to check at the end of the paper. And good luck. I will see you after the exam. Remember that the reading and listening exams are not completely random. There are some words that come up again and again and again on the past papers. So if you revise them by going on VocabSlam or by completing a lot of past papers, you should be pretty confident that you can predict the sorts of words you're going to see in your real test. There are the small but deadly words that can change the meaning of a sentence. There are also synonyms which often come up in the listening. And of course, antonyms, opposites, words which have opposite meanings to each other. If you're not sure about any of the words appearing on the screen here, pause and as an activity before your exam, look up their meaning and learn them tonight. To revise the examiner's favourite words, in other words, the vocabulary that comes up constantly on past papers, you can go to VocabSlam and you can select one of the past papers, or you can pick a mix of all of the words, which is called Examiner's Favourites. There's a foundation and a higher version. This way you will get to see a lot of vocabulary that is frequently used on this type of test. It's a final good luck from me, Year 11. I know that you're going to be absolutely brilliant in this test. The real key to passing is vocabulary knowledge and technique on the day of the exam. So if you stay calm, if you remember your highlighters, if you go through the exam slowly and carefully, and if you revise your vocabulary beforehand, you should be absolutely fine. See you tomorrow. Bis bald. Tschüss.